What up, all you jolly jelly jigglers? It's Imelda here, coming at you with another Arknights beginner guide. Okay, guys, so today we're going to be talking about defenders. This is going to be the next class rundown video. And as always, we're going to talk about the class as a whole. We're going to break up the class into separate subclasses, and then we're going to talk about each individual operator within those subclasses and discuss their pros and cons. Defenders' primary jobs are going to be blocking high amounts of enemies and preventing leaks. Defenders are really good at tanking sources of damage and soaking up damage from the rest of your team. There are some defenders that can heal and kind of take the load off of your medics, and some defenders can give some added utility that help out your operators and your team as a whole. So there are going to be 4 subclasses, the first of which is going to be the primary defenders. Primary defenders are really good at tanking. They are by far the tankiest of the defenders, and they're going to be soaking up tons of damage. The second group of defenders is going to be healing defenders, and although they're squishier than primary defenders, they're going to be making it up by being a tertiary or secondary medic to your squad. They're going to help heal and keep the sustain on your team going. The third of these subclasses is enmity defenders. Now, enmity means that they cannot be healed by allies, but this means they have self-sustain within their kit, and they're going to be doing some damage as well. The last of the subclass is DPS defenders. These are going to be strictly DPS characters, whether it be duelists or hitting AoE splash damage. Now let's talk about the pros and cons. We're going to start off here with the primary defender, Hoshigumo. Hoshigumo is a great mixture of DPS and tanking, and you can see that within her kit. First, we'll talk about her talents. Both of her talents are definitely quite useful. Her first talent is a physical and arts block, so it's really good to help her tank a bit more and go against different types of enemies and damage types. Her second talent is going to be a class-wide defense buff on defenders, so she'll help defenders out 6% defense, which can be quite nice considering that defenders do have high base defense. Her skills are pretty solid. The first one is going to be a passive skill, meaning it's always in effect, and it is a damage reflect. At skill rank 7, it does 80% of Hoshigumo's attack back to the attacker, and it gives her a small defense buff. So this is a really solid ability because it has a really long-lasting value, and its uptime is the entire time she is deployed. Her skill 3 is where a lot of the DPS comes in. She gets an attack and defense buff, and she does AoE damage to every single enemy in front of her or in the tile ahead of her. So this is the ability you'll be using for really solid DPS, and it does give her good tanking capabilities as well. The issues with Hoshigumo, number 1, her skill 3 SP cost is quite high. Even at skill rank 7, it is a 54 cost. So that is definitely on the higher side for defender characters. And in addition to that, she's also one of the more expensive defenders in the game, being a 23 cost at E2 and a 21 cost at E1. So she's definitely on the pricier side. Regardless of that, though, I think her DP cost isn't really that much of an issue. The next primary defender is going to be the 6-star Neon. Neon has a lot in her kit, so I'm going to try to get through it as quick as possible. So her first talent is a defender-wide, class-wide HP buff, which helps your characters be a bit more beefy. The second one is a shield talent. So when she's deployed, she gains 3 shields. Those shields will indefinitely block whatever damage comes in, and then they will disappear until she's deployed next. So the damage could be like 10k damage onto her, and she'll still be able to block it just fine. She does arts damage on her skill 1 and her skill 2, so it helps her not get hard walled by high defense enemies. Her skill 2, she also stops attacking, and it is a damage reflect ability. So she does arts damage back equal to a percentage of her attack. It also has the added utility of silencing, and she goes and adds +1 block to herself. So she'll become a floor block when she uses her skill 2. Her skill 3 has a lot going for it as well. So it's attack and defense buff. All allies within this range, which is pretty darn large, get a defense buff. She also increases everyone's block count by 1. So this has really great synergy with AoE guards and defenders. So defenders will block 4. AoE guards, if they're E2'd, will block and hit 4 units or enemies at once. And it gives them resistances. Resistances it's basically just a way to shorten the span of debuffs or types of CC. If we hover it here, it says stun, chill, or freeze. So it just reduces the time, the duration of that, which is quite nice. It's very, very similar to Merc Treads in League of Legends. So if anyone plays League, they'll know this is basically the same. This does have a bit of issues though. The +1 block count is very nice for most characters, but other characters like Manticore and Ethan it'll actually be a detriment to them and could get them killed because they're 0 block and they're not made to defend and block enemies. They're just made to sit there in the middle and do damage or utility. Some other cons with her is both of her skill 2 and skill 3 have really high SP cost. Her skill 3 has the highest SP cost out of any defender, at a whopping 85, and her skill 2 has also a pretty large SP cost of 50. So she's not going to get too many skills off per stage, but these skills will have a really large impact. At least her skill 3 will, in my opinion. In addition to that, her E2 talent, I mean, the shield is very nice, but once she loses those 3 shields, she just doesn't have a second talent anymore. And that can be seen as kind of a detriment compared to other 6 stars that have 2 permanent talents that are just constantly affecting them the entire stage. And she's also like Hoshigumo. She is quite expensive. E1 cost 21. E2, she's cost 23. And the last thing I just want to mention is she is a limited operator. This is the first limited operator we've talked about so far, and you can only get her about once a year. There's only a 2 week period that you can get her per year. The first time it was her release during the Chinese New Year events in, I think it was August of 2020, and then in 2021 we're not quite sure when we'll get her, but it'll probably be around the same time, about August, June 1.5, 1.5 year anniversary celebration. So she's extremely rare and she's really hard to get, being a limited. So not everyone is going to have her. The first of the 5-star primary defenders, and one of my favorite characters, is Liscarm. Liscarm is a bit more on the squishier side, but she makes up for that greatly with the amount of utility she's able to bring to the team. So she has 2 talents, which is very rare for 5-star characters. Her first talent is going to be SP recovery to both herself and a nearby ally when she is attacked. So in this 4-tile range around her, she gets SP to an ally, which is very nice. She's known as an SP battery because she is able to rapidly accelerate the SP gain of her teammates. Her arts resistance is also very nice. Arts resistance is more of a rare stat, I would say, and it makes her a bit more flexible for different types of enemies to fight. Both of her skills are quite useful. Her skill 1 is just a percentage defense buff, and her skill 2 is an AoE arts damage attack. It can hit up to 3 enemies at skill rank 7, and it has a small chance to do a 1-second mini stun. What's great about Liscarm as well is that she can hit drones. She has a pistol, so she attacks normally. Her auto attack is ranged, and she can hit drones, which is just a nice little added bonus. Issues with Liscarm, however, she does have low HP, so she's a bit squishier, like I mentioned before. And both of her skills are really timing sensitive. Her skill 2 is timing sensitive because she has a 5-second stun after it is done. So she self-stuns, which can be a little bit annoying. And it also doesn't give her any defense buff. So this is like a purely DPS ability. Her skill 1 is a bit strange to time because it is an auto activation skill. So sometimes you really need that Liscarm skill to come up, but it's just ending, and the timing can be all out of whack depending on placement and order and other stuff. But since it's a pretty low SP cost, I don't think it's actually that bad of a con, despite her not having any initial SP. The next 5-star primary defender is going to be Bison. Bison gives, for his talent, plus a flat amount of defense to himself, and it can apply the same effect to vanguards and guards if they are behind him. His skill 2 is his primary skill that you'd be using. He stops attacking, he gets a % defense buff, and he also increases taunt level, meaning that he will take aggro off of your other allies, especially the squishier DPS characters, and he'll be tanking all of that. He also can give a plus % defense buff to any allies within the 4 adjacent tiles, the up, down, left, and right of him as well. So that can be nice for some added tankiness. Now, Bison, even though he's a welfare unit, which is really great, he does have quite a bit of cons. Number 1, the positioning on his talent is just kind of bad. The defense, flat defense is nice, but guards and vanguards aren't really going to benefit that much from a defense buff. And most vanguards and guards won't even be able to hit any units or enemies in front of him if they're positioned behind him. The only characters that I can think of are ranged guards like Lapland, Silverash, and then Blaze, who's an AoE guard. Besides that, I mean, his DP cost is actually quite high, 24 cost and 22 cost. So at E1, he's actually more expensive than Hoshigumo and Neon. In addition to that, his S2, his SP cost is 54. So to compare this to something like Hoshigumo is doing a ton of attack and also has a nice defense buff. He just buffs his own defense. And his positioning can be weird between his S2 position requirements and his talent position requirements. And his S2 also makes him stop. So even though he doesn't really have high DPS in general, the S2 just makes him so he has 0 DPS. I do think, even though I've mentioned a lot of negatives about Bison, he does have a lot of potential and he can be extremely tanky. But there are some niche things about him that makes him a bit more difficult to use. The last of the 5-star primary defenders is going to be the dodge tank Croissant. So her talent basically gives her and an ally physical and arts dodge chance. At E2, she gets 20%, and the allies within that radius gain half of that, so they'd get 10%. Her skill 1 amplifies her dodge chance and her talent by 170%, so she's going to be pushed up to about 60% dodge chance at E2 and skill rank 7. And she also gets a percentage defense buff. Her skill 2 gives her a large force shift. It gives her a stun, or it stuns the enemies for 3.5 seconds, which is a huge stun. That is quite a long time. And she also deals 360% physical damage. This is an AoE effect as well, so she's going to be pushing people, doing damage and stunning a fair amount of enemies in general. It's also a pretty low SP cost as well, so that is an added bonus. Some cons to Croissant is, first of all, mostly her whole kit, especially if you run skill 1, just revolves around RNG and dodging, which can be quite fun, but it's not as consistent as, say, just a huge stat stick character standing in front and just tanking everything. She also does have She has 0 initial SP on skill 2. And her skill 1 is an auto activation skill, so it's going to be a bit trickier to time. Bubble is going to be the first of the 4-star primary defenders. She's a pretty new character at the time of filming this video, so a lot of you guys might not know too much about her. But her talent, basically, it's pretty unique. It reduces the attack of the enemies that attack her by a percentage amount for 5 seconds. At E2, it's 8%, and E1, it's 5%. It's not too high, but it definitely will help keep her alive a little bit longer. Now, her skill 2 is the primary skill you'll be using, and it is a damage reflect and taunt as well. So she's going to be tanking aggro away from some of your other characters, and it's going to really help synergize with that reflect. So Hoshigumo and Neon have damage reflect skills as well. They scale off of their attack, but Bubble's reflect actually scales off of her defense, which is a bit different. And since she has low DPS overall, it actually benefits her quite nicely. Some issues with Bubble is, first of all, she stops attacking during her skill 2, so it kind of lessens her overall DPS potential, even though she's still doing damage with the reflect. As well as the fact that her SP cost and initial SP on her skill 2 is quite jarring. So almost 50 SP cost is a pretty sizable amount, and being at initial SP is going to really slow down the process of her getting her first skill activation. Another 4-star primary defender, the free-to-play hero, and one of my recommendations for you free-to-play players out there is going to be Quora. Quora is absolutely just an unkillable monster. Her talent gives her a percentage defense buff. Her skill 2, which is the primary skill you're going to be using, it gives her +1 block and HP recovery, as well as boosting her defense stat as well. So she's going to be blocking 4. She's going to be healing herself with skill up. She's just going to be so tanky. It's pretty incredible. Some downsides to Quora is her DPS is basically non-existent, especially with their skill 2 up, because she stops attacking. Her SP cost on, or initial SP rather, on S2 is non-existent, and that's always an issue. And in addition to that, she does have relatively low HP, but her defense really makes up for it. The last of the 4-star primary defenders is Matterhorn, Matter Daddy. This is one of the few resistance tanks in the game, arts resistance tanks. He has flat arts res built into his talent. His skill 1 gives him HP regen, and his skill 2 gives him even more resistance and some additional stats as well. Lastly, his SP cost is pretty low. 17 at E0, 19 at E1, and then 21 at E2, which is not bad at all, especially for defenders. Some issues with Matterhorn. Number 1, his initial SP, even though he does get initial SP, it's just 5. So that's basically, it's only saving you really 5 seconds. So it's basically non-existent at this point. So the SP cost is a bit of a downside. In addition to that, he also has pretty low defense, 489. So he's not going to be tanking as much with that armor. He's not going to be taking high physical damage as nicely. And lastly, arts resistance and arts tanks are a pretty niche role overall. There's not too many situations where you're really going to need high res. Most of the time, you can just tank through it with really nice HP or something else like that. So he does fall in a bit of the squishier side for most general content. Now let's get into the 3-star characters. This is Beagle. She has a percentage defense talent, so it really increases her tankiness by a fair amount. She's a 3-star unit, so she's going to be extremely easy to build. All it takes is LMD to elite to promote her. She is super free-to-play friendly. Everyone's going to have this character right at the start. And Her DP cost is also very low. So at E1, she's going to be at 18 cost. So that's 3 blocks, a 3 block unit for the price of 18, which is not bad at all. Issues with Beagle. Number 1, her initial SP is non-existent. SP costs 40, initial SP 0. That's pretty tragic. And it's only a percentage defense buff as well. So maximum of 50%, which is, it's not nothing to scoff at, but you're waiting a long time just to get an average buff. Number 2, she is extremely outscaled in late game content. All 3-star characters, they cannot be E2'd. She only gets to E155. So even though she's easy to build, she's going to carry you through early game. But later game, you're going to want to replace her for someone who can scale better. Lastly, she has pretty low HP. Comparatively to the other defenders, her HP is definitely on the lower side. So she's not going to be as tanky as some of the other characters. Now, Beagle is pretty interesting because you can definitely use her in later game content, but there are much better options, and it will be much easier for you to use 4, 5, and 6 stars, really. The second of the primary 3-star defenders, and my other free-to-play recommended character is Cardigan. Now, I recommend her because she has really nice self-sustain because of her S1. Now, her S1 gives her 40% of her max HP immediately during skill activation, and it's only 20 SP cost. So she's going to be firing off this skill pretty frequently. She's going to be getting that self-sustain off, healing herself to full, and really lightening the load that your healers have on the rest of the team. Her HP talent buff gives her percentage amount of HP, and she's also super cheap. She's 18 cost at E1, so for 18 DP, you get 3 blocks, somebody who can hold a lane and really heal herself. All you need is DPS to help her out. Now, issues with Cardigan, of course, she's a 3-star, so even though she's easy to build and all that good stuff, she does get outscaled heavily in late game content because she can't be E2'd, and also she has low defense. So even though her HP is quite nice, her defense is the negative there. Last up for primary defenders is our boy, Noir Corn. Noir Corn's a 2-star character, so he gets outscaled very heavily with a max level of 30, but he's extremely easy to build, and he's very free-to-play friendly. What's great about Noir Corn is his DP cost is really low, so it's a 14 DP cost to spawn him in. That is a super cheap 3-block unit right there. He also has an HP and defense buff by 12%, and 12% can be quite nice. Issues with Noir Corn, I already mentioned he can get outscaled really heavily, but he also has no skills. So what you see right here is exactly what you get. It's just a blank 3-block unit to just take aggro temporarily for you. He has really low stats. I mean, 315 defense and 1600 HP is not the best. I mean, you still get the talent from this, but I mean, overall, it's basically just a cheap 3-block unit. Okay, so let's get into the healing defenders now. The first one being Zarya. You've probably heard of this character before because she is one of the best characters in the entire game. I'm going to be talking about her for a while, so get ready. Okay, so she has 2 talents. The first talent, it basically is an attack and defense buff that stacks up every 20 seconds she's in the battlefield up to 5 times. So it's going to really help her get stronger heals off. It's going to help her tank more, and it just benefits her being on the stage for a long period of time. The second talent she has is she is an SP battery. So every time she heals an ally, she gives 1 SP to the target. Now, this is, like, it may not seem like a lot, but if she's doing AoE healing and all that stuff, she's going to be firing off SP left and right, and your other allies are going to be getting their skills much faster in combat. So all 3 of this character's skills are very strong, in my opinion. All of them are usable. All of them are worth building. We'll start with skill 1. Skill 1, first of all, let's just get it out of the way. It has charges. At M3, it has 3 charges. Skill rank 7, it has 2. This is always great for value, especially with SP. So really great SP value here already. And it is a burst heal. So when an ally reaches below 50% HP, they get a burst heal. Now, this HP threshold is very nice because it reduces the problem of overhealing. There are some medic defenders, healing defenders in the game that have issues with overhealing. Like if her heal target has 1 HP missing, they're going to heal that and waste a whole charge. Zarya does not have that problem because of this HP threshold. Her S2. Her S2 is the AoE heal version of her S1, except that doesn't hold charges. So it heals for less, but it heals all allies within a range. To put it in perspective, AoE medics only heal 3 allies at a time, unless it's like a skill activation. She is healing all allies within range, it's just absolutely crazy. And it's on an 8 SP cost. I know it's a 0 initial SP, and I usually hound characters for having 0, but 8 SP cost is ridiculous. Her skill 3, this is more of a utility skill, more so than a heal. So even though it does heal all allies within this Afiala level range, it inflicts 40% damage taken, arts damage, and it reduces their move speed by 60%. So Manticore, who is a specialist I'll be talking about later, her entire role is to just do AoE slows. And at M3, she's only doing 50% slow. So Zarya's skill 3 is doing better than a character that his entire purpose is to slow, essentially. So absolutely ridiculous. The only downside I can think to Zarya is the fact that her SP cost on S3 is 80, which is extremely high, but you're going to be using the skill to nuke down really strong enemies, and I mean, it's just crazy overall. I mean, this character is super strong. The next character is going to be Blemish. She's another 6-star healing defender, and a lot of her kit revolves around this sleep mechanic. Now, for those who don't know, sleeping in this game is very similar to Naga Siren Ultimate in Dota 2 for all you Dota players out there, but it puts all characters asleep, or characters that are asleep. They don't take any damage, they don't move, they don't attack. But Blemish, she actually has the ability to attack these sleeping units and actually prioritizes them with additional bonus damage. Her other talent is it involves defensive recovery characters. So for defensive recovery characters, those are characters that gain SP from getting hit. So she gives those characters a bonus SP when they are attacking. All 3 of this character's skills are pretty decent, I would say. Her skill 1, it's a burst heal and an empowered auto attack that can hold charges, which is quite nice for efficiency's sake. Her skill 2, I think this is her bread and butter skill. Her skill 2 puts slumber on all ground enemies near her, and additionally heals all allies for a percentage of her attack. And the range on this one is pretty good for the healing as well. Her S3, this is like her high DPS skill. Her S3, it does a really large nuke, or heal nuke rather, really large burst heal. And it also puts her into a arts DPS mode where she's just smacking people for arts damage. The issue with Blemish is, number 1, her S3 doesn't heal herself. If her S3 healed herself and an ally, this would be a ridiculously strong skill. Number 2, the SP charge type for her S2 and S3 is her getting hit. So even though it synergizes with her S1 or E1 talent rather, on hit or defensive recovery it's not the best, I would say. It definitely is a little bit slower on the momentum. In addition to that as well, she also has pretty low defense comparatively. I mean, healing defenders overall are not nearly as tanky as the primary defenders on a like comparison basis, but she has lower defense, even lower than other healing defenders. And the S2 initial SP is 0. I mean, 16 SP cost is not that high, but you have to consider that she needs to get hit 16 times for her to get one skill off. So the 0S initial SP actually does make a difference. Next up is going to be Blemishine's older sister. This is Neural. Neural is a 5-star healing defender. What's great about her is she has a heal effectiveness talent. So she's going to be buffing the allies' healing capabilities, which is quite nice. And she boosts her own healing effectiveness as well. So both teammates and herself all have increased healing. Her S1 is great because it can hold charges, and it is a single target burst heal with a heal threshold of 50%, which is very nice for overhealing. Now, her S2, like most healing defenders, the S1 holds charges as single target. The S2 is going to be a stance change and an AoE heal. So she's going to be healing all allies, and she is going to stop attacking. So she turns into her heal state and just prioritizes healing instead. Issues with a Neural. Her skill 2, she stops attacking like most. I'm going to mention this for most of the healing defenders here, guys. Her S2, the SP cost is 52, which is quite high. So even with that initial 30 SP, 52 is definitely on the higher side. Additionally, she has quite low HP, especially among healing defenders. So she is pretty squishy overall. So the other 5-star healing defender is going to be Hung. Hung he's pretty solid. He has a percentage defense buff for himself, and he can also increase the healing effectiveness of a character behind them as long as they are on a range tile by a percentage amount. At E2, it's 75%, which is quite nice. His skill 1 and skill 2 are really basic heal defender skills. S1 is a single target burst heal. His S2 is going to be a heal stance change, medic stance change, if you want to call it that. Issue with Hung. Now, this really screws him over, honestly. He is an SP on hit charge type, so he has defensive recovery on SP. So, like, it just really messes with his kit. I feel like if he wasn't defensive charge type, he would be used a lot more, but he would basically just be a copy of Neural at that point. I mean, the 5 SP cost on S1 is fine, but 23 SP cost on S2 really, really hurts his overall healing output and just usefulness on the battlefield, sadly. In addition to that, he does have positional requirements with this Gatekeeper E2 talent, and it's not really that big of a deal, but he does have DPS issues as well. Okay, so the one and only 4-star healing defender is Gummy. Gummy is my recommendation, free-to-play recommendation for healing defenders. She is pretty easy to get, especially if you spend money. You can buy the Gummy starter pack, for 99 cents plus tax, and she is really good value overall. She's definitely worth that $1. Free to play. She used to be a little bit easier to get because of recruitment, but if you spam heal defense or healing defender tags, eventually you'll be able to get her. Now, her talent gives a percentage chance for her to do additional damage and get a stun off, but it is a pretty low percentage chance, so I barely even notice this when I use her, or when I did use her quite frequently. What's great about her, though, is her skills. Her S1 is the classic charge-holding single target burst heal, and the S2 is the medic mode where she stops attacking and just heals. Now, Gummy has really high HP, especially for a 4-star. So she is quite tanky issues. She does have low defense, so it kind of equals out with her high HP. She has very low DPS, and she has an RNG talent. The last thing I want to mention is I did before talk about an overheal issue that healing defenders can have, and medics in general, rather. Gumi is a prime example of that because she does not have a heal threshold on her S1, so she's going to be topping people off and losing out on the charge value because she's going to be overhealing. The 3-star healing defender is Spot. Now, Spot is the reason why Gumi is so much harder to get now from recruitments because he kind of took her spot. So if you're looking for Gumi, expect a lot of spots on the way. Spot is a pretty good unit, though. He does get physical evasion after healing an ally, and his skill is the medic mode, where he stops attacking and heals for a set amount of time. Spot's issues, even though he's super free-to-play friendly and super easy to build, he does get outscaled, being a 3-star character. And in addition, his SP cost, even though it's not ridiculously high or anything, 40 SP cost just to get the heal off is not the best. Now let's get into some of the off-roll subclasses. This is the Enmity subclass, and if you don't know what Enmity means, it basically means that they cannot be healed by friendly allies, but they do have their own self-sustain. Some issues with Enmity overall is their DP cost is ridiculously high. It's like higher than AoE casters, but this character in particular really makes up for that. Now, this is Mudrock. She's a 6-star. She just came out recently at the time of recording this video. So if you're fortunate enough to get her, I definitely recommend building her. Now, she has a lot going for her. Her first talent is she gains a shield, and when that shield breaks, she gains a set amount of her max HP. So this really helps her with her self-sustain because she can't be healed by allies and keeps her on the battlefield for much longer. Her second talent, it's not the most useful, but it can come in handy in some situations. She does take reduced damage from Sarkaz enemies. Sarkaz, they are relatively common in certain chapters, but 30% is actually quite a decent amount. Let's talk about this character's skills now. Her skill 1, I don't really think is very useful. It's just a defense increase. Her skill 2 and her skill 3, on the other hand, are pretty crazy. So she gains a set amount of her max HP on the next attack. She deals a crap ton of damage to every single enemy within a range around her. And she also has a chance to stun them. Now, this, I mean, even though it is a defensive recovery SP type, she is going to be shooting the skill off a crap ton, and it's going to be killing everything and help her keep self-sustain while on the battlefield. Her skill 3 is also, I mean, it's just a wall of text, you guys. I mean, it is a per second SP charge type, so you don't have to worry about her getting hit. But because she sits down on the ground, she becomes invulnerable. While she's in that invulnerable state, she slows every enemy around her by 60%. And then at the end, she stuns all of those enemies for a whopping 3.5 seconds at skill rank 7. So that stun actually goes up as she gets masteries. And once that skill is done, she has increased attack speed, increased defense percent, and increased defense. And she's hitting every single enemy equal to her block count. So at E2, she's going to be hitting, I mean, even at E1, she's just hitting 3. I mean, she only gets the skill at E2, but, you know, she's hitting 3 enemies. So she becomes an AoE guard, a slower, and she has a crazy long stun. I mean, yeah, this character is like is crazy as well, not gonna lie. The issues with Mudrock, she is pretty resource hungry, and by that I mean she is not gonna have that much value at like E130. She really shines when you put a ton of resource into her. When you M3 her skill 3 or M3 her skill 2, when she E2 and high level her, she's going to be popping off, though. Like, the amount of potential this character has is crazy high. She is on hit recovery on S2, so that's always an issue. But, I mean, 5 SP cost is low, so it kind of makes up for that, I suppose. She is an enmity, so she can't be healed by her allies. She can get blown up by a character if she's not built high enough, or if you put her in a bad situation. And her DP cost, I mean, guys, her DP cost is ridiculous. 36 cost at E2, 34 cost at E1. So if you don't have a Myrtle or Elysium built, it's going to be really hard to get this character on the battlefield, especially on stages where DP gain is, it's like really slowed, or there's like a DP risk on CC. Granted, this character is a monster in contingency contract as well, so yeah, definitely build her up. The other enemy defender is a Vulcan. It's gonna be Vulcan. Vulcan is, I actually really like this character, but she is extremely rare, and the reason for that is because she is in a recruitment specific, a recruitment unique unit. So the only way to get her is through recruitments. If you want to know how to get her, I made a recruitment guide video on my channel, so you can go check that out. But Vulcan is pretty solid because even though she's an enmity character, she does have a lot of HP regen built into her kit. Her talent gives her HP regen. Her skill 1 gives her HP regen as well. And her skill 2 also gives her HP regen. So she's going to be able to recover quite nicely. Her S1 gives her an additional block as well. It makes her quite tanky, which is nice. Her S2 is her more damage dealing ability. So she's going to be hitting equal to her block count. So she's going to be hitting 2. So she does lose out on block, but she's still hitting 2 for a decent amount of damage as well. Now, besides being enmity and, you know, being rare, her SP costs are all quite high. I mean, 50 SP cost, 50 SP cost. So it's going to take her a little bit to get her first skill off. Like all enmity characters, or enmity defenders rather, she is higher on the DP cost side. 35 cost at E2, 33 cost at E1. Next up is the DPS defenders, the first being the Thick Anaconda Eunectis. Eunectis is a 6-star character, and I feel like she has a ton of potential, but she really is hindered by her trait, where she can only gain SP when blocking. Now, this really, really affects her skill uptime, and it sadly pushes her into a more niche category, despite her being quite strong. There's 2 talents. The first one, it helps out mitigate the damage done by her trait, where she gains plus 0.2 SP a second when she's blocking. It helps her get her skills up a bit faster. And her other talent is an HP thresholds reliant buff. When she's above 50% HP, she gets an attack buff. When she's below 15% HP, she gains Shelter Effect, which is essentially just a tank buff. Now, her skill 2 and her skill 3 are going to be her primary skills you're going to be using. Her skill 2, all blocked enemies are continuously stunned while she gains an attack percentage buff. So she's going to be perma-stunning the enemies that she is blocking, which is quite nice, especially for the added utility. Her skill 3, she turns into a mech and is replaced by this little bluebird. I'll show you right here on the left side. This comes down from the sky. It starts mowing people down. She gains a large amount of attack and defense. Her block count goes up +2. She gets HP per second. And then she is stunned after the skill ends. But this is like one of the best boss killing skills in the entire game. She is going to be absolutely shredding anything in her path. issues with Eunectis. There are quite a few of them, sadly. Number one, we already mentioned her trait. She is a duelist, surprisingly enough, so she's only blocking one. Even at E2, she only blocks one, so her skill 2 is kind of... She's only perma-stunning one enemy, and her DP cost is really high, 33 at E2 and 31 at E1. So this character can do a ton of damage, but she's definitely pushed into the more niche category, sadly. The 5-star DPS defender is Eunectis. She specializes in resistance and arts damage. So her talent, she gets a flat amount of arts resistance, and when she is hit by an arts attack, she is going to gain SP for herself, so that'll help her get her skills up a lot faster. Her skill 1 is her defense skill, and her skill 2 is her attack skill. On S1, she blocks an arts attack, and she reduces arts damage taken by a percentage for the rest of the skill. Her skill 2, she increases her range, so she's attacking at range now, meaning she can hit drones. She also does splash damage, and she does arts attack, as well as increasing her defense by percentage as well. Now, some negatives to Asbestos. When her skill 2 is active, she does get a slower attack speed, but she makes up for that with AoE damage. And she also has some SP issues. So her S2 SP is 54, which is quite high, and her S1 has 0 initial SP. Without her S1 or S2 up, she can also be kind of squishy, but with her S2 or S1 up, with her skills up, she makes up for that a pretty decent amount. Now, the last character for the defenders is going to be the 4-star DPS Durnar. Durnar is super easy to get and very free-to-play friendly because you can get her from the credit store after you max potential Courier and Gaviel. Now, Durnar is more similar to the Asbestos type of DPS character. When she uses her skills, she does arts damage, and her talent gives her an attack and defense percent buff, which, although it's small, it is pretty helpful. Now, her skill 2 is her primary skill. She's going to be hitting enemies equal to her block count, so she's going to be hitting 3 enemies in an AoE attack, which is quite nice considering she does arts damage. Now, issues with Durnar, like Asbestos, she is quite squishy, and sadly her S2 is a on-hit recovery or defensive recovery. So even though 31 SP cost isn't too high for on-hit recovery, it actually takes a lot longer. That's going to be it for the Defender class rundown, guys. Hopefully this was helpful in showing you guys all the defenders out there in the game. If you guys liked the video or you have any questions, definitely leave a comment. I always try to respond to as many comments as soon as I can. If you guys want to participate and join us making these spreadsheets, you can check me out on twitch.tv/melderfish. It'll be in the description down below. If you want a link to the spreadsheet here, so you can check it out whenever you want, see the other class rundowns as well, then you can check the description too. Thank you guys so very much for all the support. We just hit 100 subscribers on YouTube at the time of recording this video, so I'm very happy about that. I'm going to try to get these videos out. They are very time consuming though, so I might alternate between this and other guy videos. Definitely check those out, guys. Thank you so much once again, and peace out.